Keeping on with the theme of Ukrainian Lives Matter, this week I'm going to give you a very interesting version of Top Secret Storytime. Usually in this segment, I try to have an amusing story from the intelligence, espionage, or special operations world. But I want to talk about something more serious. You know, I am not being tongue-in-cheek when I use the phrase Ukrainian Lives Matter. In the year that I was there, I found out that to the Russians, the lives of no one mattered. Ukrainian civilians were routinely murdered, as we saw in the previous segment. They didn't care about the lives of their own soldiers, whose bodies were left all over the battlefield. But I want to talk about an incident which occurred apparently earlier in January, and the video of which has only been released this week. A Ukrainian army soldier was in a position that was overrun. Russian forces captured him, and his name was Oleksandr Matsayevsky. He was from the 163rd Battalion of the 119th Territorial Defense Unit. While being spoken to after being captured, he was standing smoking a cigarette, and the Russians asked him for a comment, and he said, "Slava Ukraini," which means glory to Ukraine. He apparently knew what was going to come next. The Russians immediately shot him. First bullet went through his head. The rest, the other 14 or 15, went through his body while he laid there, and the Russians kept shooting him. This blatant, brazen execution just goes to the mindset of the Russian invader of Ukraine. They are not people. They do not have humanity. And this immediately brought back an incident that occurred with me back in 2004. And that was with an Italian bodyguard who worked for me. His name was Fabrizio Quattrocchi. He worked for a very small group of Italian ex-special forces that were assigned to my company, which I contracted, and we were securing people who worked for the U.S. government in a hotel in downtown Baghdad called the Babel Hotel, or the Babylon Hotel. Fabrizio was famous not just for what would later come to pass, but for a while, he was famous as one of the only non-combatants in the war who actually stopped and held up a Delta Force snatch and grab operation in which they were seizing someone in that hotel. Fabrizio was guarding the stairwell leading from the upper floors and stopped this Delta Force team from bringing their captive down until he had cleared it and made sure that they weren't going anywhere near our people. So he was pretty famous amongst the private security community for a while. Unfortunately, while escorting a team back to the Jordanian border, Fabrizio was stopped outside the city of Fallujah by a U.S. Army unit. They disarmed them for some inexplicable reason. They were legitimate. They had authorization documents. Fabrizio then, without adequate weapons, went back to Baghdad, drew some other weapons, returned to that area around Fallujah, and was rerouted away from the main highway by the U.S. Army. And that led to their subsequent kidnapping by al-Qaeda in Iraq. The Italians tried to negotiate for their lives, and to make themselves serious, al-Qaeda executed one of the prisoners, and that prisoner was Fabrizio. Fabrizio is most famous now throughout Italy. He's considered a hero of Italy because just before al-Qaeda was about to execute him, they asked, essentially, he knew what was going on. They asked him to say something, and instead of saying something that would lead them to save his life, he said, "This is how an Italian man dies." And they shot him through the head. Fabrizio is considered a hero of Italy. That is an honored status equivalent to the Medal of Honor in the United States. He is former Italian, mountain troop commando. And when I saw the execution of Matsayev, I knew immediately that this is exactly how a man dies. You know you're in an impossible situation. You know what's coming next. You have a choice. You have a choice to beg, you have a choice to plead, or you have a choice to stand and die on your feet instead of kneeling as a slave. And so this is out to my brother Fabrizio and to our new brother, Alexander. Slava Ukraini. But every time you say Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, it is always responded to by Heroyam Slava, glory to the heroes.